Jake Mitchell wasn't supposed to be digging in the Arizona desert during his summer break. He was supposed to be at the beach with his friends playing video games, or doing anything else that didn't make him sweat through his shirt while he brushed dust off of rocks that nobody cared about. But his mom wouldn't let him go. College applications needed volunteer hours, and it seems that spending 3 weeks at an archaeological dig site was a good way to build character. Dr. Patterson, the site director, was happy about some pieces of pottery they found last week. Jake acted like he cared while he scraped dirt with a brush that looked like it was meant to make the job take as long as possible. Around him, other grad students and volunteers worked in their assigned squares, and they all looked just as miserable in the 100-degree heat. Everything changed on Tuesday afternoon. Jake was working in the deepest part of the excavation pit, which no one else wanted to do because it meant climbing down a ladder and working in a hole that felt like an oven. The sun hit a certain angle and something caught his attention. There was a flash of blue light that came and went from deeper in the rock face. Jake looked around. Everyone else was either working hard or going to the shade to drink some water. He knew he had to call Dr. Patterson. Protocol said you couldn't look into anything by yourself. But Jake was 17, curious and sick of looking for 3 weeks and only finding useless rocks. He picked up a chisel and began to carefully work on the place where he had seen the light. The rock fell apart too easily as if it were waiting to be opened. His fingers brushed against something smooth and cold, and all of a sudden he wasn't hot anymore. He was not tired. He could feel every nerve in his body screaming that he had found something impossible. Jake moved more debris out of the way, working faster now, his heart racing in his chest. He could tell that the object was metal, but it wasn't rusty or broken like metal should be after being buried for thousands of years. It shone like it had just been polished. Jake figured out what he was looking at as more of it became clear. The sword. Dr. Patterson had dated the sword to 50,000 years ago, when people were still learning how to make stone tools. It was buried in layers of rock. The blade was 3 feet long and perfectly balanced. There were symbols carved along its length that looked like they were moving and changing when Jake looked at them directly. The metal was different from anything he'd ever seen. It was dark, but it had a blue light coming from inside it that he had noticed before. The handle was covered in something that felt warm to the touch and looked like leather. It felt like it was alive. Jake slowly reached for it, half expecting it to break into pieces or be a strange rock formation that looked like a sword. He gripped the handle tightly and the world blew up. The light that lit up the blade was so bright that Jake should have been blind. The symbols formed patterns that burned into his eyes. Then the voice came, not through his ears but right into his mind. It spoke in a language he'd never heard before but somehow understood perfectly. Champion protocol started. The genetic scan is done. Confirmed neural compatibility. The bonding sequence has started. Welcome, Warden. Jake tried to drop the sword. His hand wouldn't budge. The weapon was now part of him, stuck to his palm as if it had grown there. Energy flowed up his arm. It wasn't painful, but it was too much, like putting his finger in an electrical socket that didn't stop. His mind was filled with pictures. Huge ships on fire in the dark of space, cities made of crystal and light that cover whole planets, and battles fought with weapons that could break moons in half. He saw beings that weren't human, tall and graceful, fighting hard against impossible odds. He saw the last of them fall and something old and powerful being hidden away, sent through time to wait for someone worthy. He saw hands that were tired and hopeful put this sword in the ground. Saw those hands setting up some kind of trigger, a time lock that would keep the weapon hidden until the right person, the right champion, came along. And somehow, after 50,000 years of waiting, the sword had chosen that person to be a 17-year-old kid from Phoenix who just wanted to go home. Jake stumbled back, gasping for breath, and his mind was racing with everything he had just seen. He still held the sword in his hand, and it still glowed with that strange blue light. The symbols on the blade pulsed in time with his heart. "Hey guys!" Jake shouted, his voice breaking. "I believe I found something." He climbed out of the pit with shaky legs, and no matter how hard he tried, the sword wouldn't let go of his grip. The other volunteers looked at him like he was crazy. Dr. Patterson dropped her clipboard and turned pale. "That's not possible," she said quietly. "That can't be here. That can't be real." But it was true. Jake could feel the power humming through it, and he could still hear that voice in the back of his mind talking about champions and protocols and other things he didn't understand. He heard the cars then. 3 black SUVs speeding across the desert, kicking up clouds of dust and going way too fast for the rough ground. 5 minutes ago they weren't there. There was no way they could have gotten here so fast unless they had been waiting close by. If they hadn't been watching. Jake looked at the sword in his hand, the SUVs getting closer, and Dr. Patterson backing away from him with fear in her eyes. His phone buzzed in his pocket. When he took it out, the screen was full of alerts and notifications from apps he didn't know about, as well as messages in languages that made his eyes hurt to look at. The voice in his head spoke again, this time more clearly and urgently. "They're coming. They have been looking. You have to run, young warden. Get out of here or they'll get you. They will take the gun. They will find your world." Jake made a choice. He ran to his car, and the sword got brighter with every step. The black SUVs behind him got closer, and the sky above him started to shimmer with something that wasn't a heat mirage. His summer just got a lot more fun. Jake's hurt. He pushed the Honda Civic as hard as it would go, even though it wasn't made for high-speed chases through the Arizona desert. The black SUVs stayed behind him for the first 20 miles, close enough that he could see the tinted windows in his rearview mirror but not quite catching up. It felt wrong, like they were pushing him instead of chasing him. The sword was still glowing and humming with that strange energy that made his teeth hurt. It was lying across the passenger seat. Jake kept one hand on the wheel and tried not to look at it. Every time he did, more pictures came to mind. Fights. Booms. Things dying in the empty space. His phone was acting up. The screen flashed with alerts in languages he didn't know, symbols that hurt to look at, and notifications from apps that he knew he hadn't installed before. He tried to turn it off, but it wouldn't listen. The sword's energy was affecting the electronics nearby. The radio changed stations on its own, picking up static and strange clicking sounds that sounded like voices. At mile 40, everything went wrong. The engine sputtered once, twice, and then stopped working. The lights on the dashboard blinked and then went out. Jake stopped on the empty highway, and his heart sank as the SUVs pulled up behind him and formed a line that blocked any chance of escape. For a long time, nothing happened. Jake sat there with white knuckles on the steering wheel, watching in his mirror as the doors of the SUV opened. He thought that government agents would be there. Men in suits with badges and serious looks on their faces. What he got was much worse. The thing that came out of the front car looked like a person, but that's where the similarities ended. It was at least 7 feet tall and had skin that looked like storm clouds. It had too many bends in its arms, and when it moved, it didn't walk. It flowed forward with an unnatural grace. The face looked almost human, but the eyes were too big and completely black, like looking into empty space. Without thinking, Jake's hand found the sword. As soon as he tightened his grip on the handle, blue fire shot out of the blade. The creature stopped and tilted its head as if it was interested. "Human juvenile," it said, and Jake almost screamed because the voice was so clear and the mouth barely moved. The words sounded like metal grinding against metal, like something breaking deep down in the ground. "You have Valerian technology. This breaks the laws of galactic quarantine. Give up the artifact right away." Jake couldn't talk because his mouth was too dry. He slowly got out of the car, keeping the sword between him and the alien, which was what this was, an actual alien. His brain was working very hard not to completely shut down from fear. "I don't get it," Jake was able to say. "What do you need?" "The weapon," the creature said. More of them were coming out of the other cars now. They were all tall, gray, and wrong. "You don't have permission to own Valerian artifacts because you are not a member of that species. We are Kashari. We are in charge of this area. The sword is ours." "Yeah, well, I tried to put it down," Jake said, surprised that his voice was working at all. "It's not going to let go." The lead Kashari made a noise that could have been laughter or disgust. It reached behind its back and pulled out a gun that looked like a rifle and something living. It had curves and glowing parts that flashed red light. It said calmly, "Then we will take it away with your arm. This is better than firing. Thank Kashari for their mercy." The weapon charged up with a whine that made Jake's bones shake. It felt like time was moving slowly. He could see the energy building up at the barrel and the alien's finger getting tighter on whatever it was that was the trigger. The voice in his head spoke clearly for the first time since the dig site, even though he was frozen. "Lift the blade. Follow your gut. I will help you." Jake raised the sword. He didn't know what else to do. The Kashari fired, and Jake saw a red beam of energy shoot toward his chest. It was so bright that it left afterimages in his vision. He was going to die on a deserted road with an alien sword he didn't know how to use. Except that the beam never hit him. Jake definitely hadn't consciously activated the sword, which made blue light explode from it and form a shield. The energy blast split around him without hurting him. It burned the pavement on either side but not him. Jake was shocked by the shimmering barrier. The Kashari hissed something that sounded like rocks rolling down a mountain. The other aliens raised their weapons and spread out in a way that showed they had been trained in the military. And then Jake's body moved without him telling it to. The sword taught him how to fight by sending information directly to his nervous system through the neural bond. Even though he was still panicking in his head, his muscles knew what to do. He stepped forward, swung the blade in a way that felt both strange and perfectly normal, and watched blue fire follow the edge. The weapon of the lead Kashari broke into two neat pieces on the ground. The alien looked at its empty hands in what could have been shock. "It can't be done," it said. "You are primitive. Your kind has only just learned how to fly in space. You can't use Valerian technology. You should be turned down by the authorization protocols." "Tell that to the sword," Jake said in shock. His whole body was shaking with fear, adrenaline, and something else that felt like power flowing through his veins. The other Kashari started shooting. Jake moved on instinct, and the sword told him how to move in ways he had never practiced before. He used the flat of the blade to block energy beams, rolled under shots that would have killed him, and then he found himself in the middle of a circle of aliens who looked a lot less sure of themselves. One of them took out something that looked like a phone. Jake's improved hearing, thanks to whatever the sword was doing to him, picked up bits of the conversation. "Valerian authentication confirmed, threat level critical, and notify the collective right away," are some of the words. Without saying anything else, the Kashari went back to their cars. The first one pointed at Jake with a finger that was too long. "You have made a serious mistake, human. The Kashari Collective has been keeping an eye on your world for decades. When the quarantine ends, we will own Earth. You can't stop what's coming. You are a primitive person with a weapon you don't know how to use. Why are you running then?" Jake shot back, trying to sound braver than he was. The alien's face did something that could have been a smile. "We don't run. We tell. By the time the sun goes down, every power in the galaxy will know that a human has the blade of the first warden. They will come for you. They will come for your world. When they do, there will be no place to hide." The SUVs drove away, leaving Jake alone on the empty highway with a broken car and a glowing sword. He realized that his life would never be normal again. He looked down at his phone, which had somehow started to work again. The screen showed news alerts and videos going viral on social media faster than anything else he'd ever seen. Someone had recorded the whole thing. The video was blurry and shot from a long way away, but it clearly showed Jake fighting aliens on an Arizona highway with a sword made of blue fire. The video had already been shared millions of times. Some people said it was fake, some wanted the government to explain, and some seemed really scared. "Teen with glowing sword fights aliens in Arizona" was a hot topic all over the world. In some of the screenshots you could see Jake's face. It was blurry but still easy to tell who he was. The voice in his head spoke again, this time more gently but still urgently. "I'm sorry, young warden. I didn't expect this much attention. Ancient laws kept your world secret and safe. But the Kashari have broken those rules by doing business here. And now that you've turned me on and the galaxy knows that a human has Valerian technology, the protection is gone. They will arrive. Not just the Kashari but also others. Some people are looking for the weapon. Others want to get rid of the threat you pose. You have to leave this world or everyone you care about will be caught up in what's to come." Jake looked at the sword, the highway that was empty in both directions, and the sky that suddenly looked a lot less friendly. There were ships up there. Aliens. Whole civilizations that thought of people as primitive, as resources, and as problems to be solved. And somehow he had become the biggest problem of all. Jake hid for 2 days in an abandoned gas station off Route 66, drinking warm soda from a vending machine he had broken into and trying not to think about the fact that aliens were looking for him. The sword kept glowing all the time. It was propped up against the wall and hummed softly. Sometimes, it filled his mind with pictures he didn't want to see. Fights. Stars that are dying. Civilizations turning to dust. His phone was no longer useful. When he turned it on, it always showed messages in strange languages and directions to places that were definitely not on Earth. The news was going crazy. The government said the highway incident was a hoax, but no one believed them. There were too many people who had seen the video. The gray figures and the sword's burning blue light had been seen by too many cameras. Jake was trying to decide what to do next when the woman walked in like she owned the place. She looked like a normal person, maybe in her early 40s, with short dark hair and a face that looked like it belonged to an aunt or a high school teacher. She wore jeans and a leather jacket and walked with a relaxed confidence that made Jake nervous right away. "Easy," she said, holding up both hands as Jake reached for the sword. "I'm not here to hurt you. Rachel is my name and I've been looking for that weapon for a long time." "Stay back," Jake said, and the blade lit up in his hand. His hands were steadier now than they had been on the highway, but his heart was still pounding against his ribs. Rachel stopped, looked at him for a moment and then did something that shocked him. She smiled, and it was sad, tired, and real all at the same time. She said, "You're doing better than I thought you would. Most people who use Valerian technology go into shock for at least a week. After 2 hours, you fought off a Kashari extraction team. That's great. How do you know about the Kashari?" Jake yelled. "Because I've been fighting them longer than your country has been around," Rachel said calmly. "I'm Valerian. I'm the last Valerian then. Before humans even made the wheel, my people owned that sword." Jake wanted to call her crazy, but he was holding an alien sword that glowed and talked to him through his mind, so his idea of crazy had changed a lot. It looked like Rachel knew he was hesitating because she took out a small crystal smartphone-like device. She tapped it twice, and a hologram appeared in the space between them. The picture showed a creature that looked almost human but was taller, more graceful, and had eyes that held too much knowledge. It wore armor that looked like it was made of light and held a sword that looked just like the one Jake had. Rachel said softly, "That was my brother. He was the last warden before the ascendancy fell. 10,000 years ago, he died fighting to buy time for younger species to get strong enough to protect themselves. He put that sword in a time lock and set it to wait for someone worthy. Someone who would defend instead of attack." Jake said, "And it chose a teenager from Arizona. Good plan." Rachel said, "The sword doesn't care how old you are or how much experience you have. It cares about what you mean. About what's in your heart when you hold it. You seem to have passed a test that no one, not even my own people, has passed in thousands of years." She pointed to the door. "We can't stay here. There are other people besides the Kashari who are looking for you now. That short performance on the highway made you famous all over the galaxy. There are species out there that would destroy Earth just to keep that weapon from being used. You can either come with me to a safe place or stay here and wait for something worse than the Kashari to find you." Jake looked at the sword, the woman who said she was an ancient alien, and the gas station that was empty and smelled like motor oil and despair. He thought about his mom, who was probably going crazy with worry. His friends, who had no idea that things had just gotten a lot more complicated. People going about their daily lives while the world around them fell apart. "Where?" he asked. Rachel said, "Somewhere the big players can't get to you. Neutral ground. Come on, we don't have a lot of time. By now they will have triangulated this spot." She walked behind a broken vending machine that still advertised Coke for 75 cents. Jake followed her and saw her take out that crystal thing again. She pressed a series of buttons that made the air shimmer and fold in on itself. Reality opened up like a curtain being pulled back, and there was a swirling portal of light that definitely shouldn't be in a gas station in New Mexico. Rachel said, "Trust me," and went through. Jake took a deep breath, tightened his grip on the sword, and followed her into the unknown. It felt like being turned inside out and put back together in the wrong order during the change. Jake stumbled through and ended up on a platform looking down at the most chaotic scene he'd ever seen. They were in a huge space station that was so big he couldn't see the walls on the other side. There were aliens of all kinds in the place. Things with too many arms, beings that looked like living crystal, creatures that floated instead of walked, and dozens of other types that his brain couldn't figure out how to categorize. "Welcome to the crossroads," Rachel said, holding him steady as he swayed on his feet. "Oldest neutral station in the universe. There can't be any violence or weapons except for ceremonial ones. Every major power has to respect its sovereignty. It's the only place where you can really breathe without worrying about who might shoot you in the back." Jake looked at the people moving through what looked like a mix of a market, a spaceport, and something else his mind couldn't put into words. Aliens were trading things he didn't know about and arguing in languages that hurt his ears. They were also carefully ignoring the human teenager with the glowing sword. Jake said, "This is crazy." Rachel said, "This is the galaxy. And now you need to know the truth about it." She took him through the crowds to a quieter area, a cafe with transparent walls that looked out over what looked like open space with stars visible. Rachel ordered something that looked like coffee but smelled like cinnamon and lightning while they sat at a table. Rachel started by saying, "Here's what you need to know. The galaxy isn't a nice place. There isn't a group of planets in the Federation that work together for peace. There is no good council that protects the weak. There are only those who have power and those who don't. The strong do what they want and the weak pay the price." She pointed to the station around them. "We, the Valerian Ascendancy, were different from other people. We thought that the strong should protect those who couldn't protect themselves. For thousands of years, we helped younger species grow by protecting them from predators and giving them time to grow. Jake, we kept your ancestors safe. We made sure nothing could kill you before you had a chance, even when people were still learning how to make fire." "What happened to you?" Jake asked. "We got too strong," Rachel said with anger. "Too powerful. Other empires began to worry that our network of protected species would let us control everything. That's why they came together. Hundreds of worlds and billions of soldiers were all afraid of what we were. The war went on for 300 years. We lost. She took a drink and looked far away. The last wardens hid the artifacts of our civilization all over the galaxy, locking them up and spreading them out. One of them was your sword. And Earth was put under quarantine, with old laws saying that no advanced species could interfere with your growth until you could travel faster than light on your own. But the Kashari were on Earth, Jake said. That's right, Rachel said. For decades, they've been breaking the quarantine to study humans and get ready to take over your world as soon as the protection ends. On that highway, you didn't just fight off an extraction team. You showed that the quarantine was broken. You showed that people have used advanced technology. And now, every major power in the galaxy has the right to do whatever they want to Earth. Jake was sick. So I made things worse. Rachel said firmly, no. The Kashari made things worse when they chose to cheat. You just showed it. And now you can do something about it. Like what? I am 17. I'm not anyone. Rachel said, you are the first person in 10,000 years to be accepted as a warden. That sword doesn't just cut things, Jake. It's a sign. A reminder of what the galaxy used to be like before power became the only thing that mattered. Some species out there still know about the Valerian ascendancy. Still remember how it felt to be safe instead of being used. She leaned forward and her eyes were very focused. I can show you how to use that weapon the right way. To use all of its features. You can then choose to hide and hope that Earth survives what's coming, or you can stand up and fight for your world the way my people once fought for yours. Jake looked at the sword on his lap and then out at the stars through the clear walls. Earth was out there somewhere, small and weak, and it had no idea how dangerous it was. His mother was down there. His buddies. Billions of people are just trying to get by. Teach me, Jake said. Rachel's idea of training was to spend 3 months trying to kill Jake in more and more creative ways. The first week was just learning how to move with the sword, which sounded easy until Rachel explained that Valerian combat meant fighting in 3 dimensions, dealing with different levels of gravity, and reacting to threats that moved faster than the human eye could see. For most of those early days, Jake lay on his back, gasping for air, while Rachel stood over him with a training blade that left bruises but didn't cut him. The sword helped by sending him techniques through the neural link, but knowing how to do something and actually doing it were 2 very different things. Rachel would say, again, every time he messed up. And he made a lot of mistakes. But Jake slowly and painfully began to understand what the sword could do. It was more than just a weapon. It was a tool that did what he wanted and needed it to do. When he focused on defending, it made shields that could stop energy weapons. It made his reflexes better than those of any other person when he needed to move faster. It studied the other person's fighting style and suggested ways to counter it before Jake even knew what was going on. Jake could fight Rachel in the training ring by the end of the 2nd month. By the 3rd month he sometimes won. The sword no longer felt like a strange thing attached to his hand, it felt like an extension of his own arm and will. That's when Rachel told him the truth about what they were getting ready for. She pulled up a holographic display of a facility hidden in an asteroid field and said, the Kashari Research Station. They've been running it for 15 years. It's where they take people they've kidnapped from Earth. Learn about them. Take them apart to get their DNA. Find out what your weaknesses are before they attack you. Jake stared at the picture and his stomach turned. How many people? Rachel said softly, our intelligence says somewhere between 30 and 50. Taken over the years. Cases of missing people that were never solved because no one was looking for alien kidnappers. We're getting them out, Jake said. There was no question. Rachel said, it will be dangerous. The Kashari will fight back. And once we do this, once we attack one of their bases, there's no turning back. You will be starting a war with one of the biggest groups in the galaxy. Jake thought about people who were locked up in cages and used as test subjects by aliens who thought of humans as nothing more than lab rats. He thought about families on Earth who had lost loved ones and never knew what really happened. The sword pulsed in his hand, reacting to his anger and willpower. Then I guess we're going to war, he said. They arrived at the station at what was considered dawn in space. Rachel expertly drove their small ship past the outer defenses, using Valerian stealth technology that made them nearly invisible. She had been doing this for hundreds of years. They parked at a maintenance airlock, and Jake cut through the door with his sword as if it were made of paper. The alarms went off right away. A lot of Kashari guards ran toward them. They were gray figures in black armor with red glowing weapons. Jake didn't think twice. 3 months of training had made the combat patterns second nature to him. He moved through them like water, with the sword trailing blue fire. He deflected energy beams and cut through their weapons with precise strikes that left the aliens alive but unarmed. Rachel had made him promise that he wouldn't kill anyone unless he had to. "You are not an executioner," she had said. "You're a guardian. Keep in mind the difference." They fought their way deeper into the station, following the layout Rachel had memorized. The Kashari kept coming, but they clearly weren't ready for someone who knew how to use Valerian technology. Jake's shields were too strong for their weapons to get through. Their combat algorithms couldn't figure out how to move when an AI that was 10,000 years old was in charge. They fell back, regrouped, and then fell back again. Jake found the holding cells on the lower levels of the station. The doors were magnetically sealed, but the sword worked with the Valorian-era locks that the Kashari had taken from old salvage. The cells opened and Jake saw what the aliens had done to his people. There were 37 people in all, from teens to seniors, some of whom had been missing for months and others for years. They were thin, scared, and had scars from medical tools and experiments. Some of them cried when they saw Jake with his glowing sword cutting through their prison like an angel of death. Some people just stood there in shock. "I'm a person," Jake said to them, his voice steady even though he was very angry. "I'm from the United States. I'm here to take you back home." It was a mess getting them to the ship. The Kashari had asked for more troops, and more heavily armed police were heading to their location. Rachel stood guard in the hallway while Jake led the freed prisoners through the station. The sword sang in his hands, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, Jake felt like he was doing the right thing. One of the Kashari leaders tried to stop them from getting away. It was bigger than the others, had armor that looked more advanced and weapons on its shoulders. It spoke in the voice that Jake had come to hate. "You're wrong, human warden. You can't keep them all safe. People will judge your species. Someone will take your world. This doesn't change anything." "It changes everything," Jake said, and the sword got brighter because he was so sure. "Do you want to come to Earth? You want to hurt my people? Then you have to go through me first. And I promise you, I'm only getting started." He got up and moved. The Kashari commander was quick and skilled, and cybernetics should have given it every edge. But Jake was fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves, which was something it didn't have. The sword did what it was supposed to do, and the commander's weapons fell to the deck in pieces. They got away with all 37 prisoners. Rachel jumped their ship into hyperspace and Jake sat with the freed humans. Many of them touched him as if they couldn't believe he was real. Beth, an older woman who had been taken from a parking lot in Denver 2 years ago, just kept crying and saying thank you over and over. Jake knew this was just the start though. Rachel had made sure that every camera on the station recorded the raid. The video of a human teenager with a Valerian blade breaking through Kashari security and freeing prisoners would quickly spread across the galaxy's networks. And it did. By the time they got the rescued people to a safe place where they could be sent back to Earth, the video had gone viral across many civilizations. Some people were calling Jake a terrorist. Some people called him a hero. Some people said he was a sign of something they thought was dead, fighting back against the power of the powerful. Rachel got the message then. It came through on priority channels with the Hegemony Council's seal on it. The Hegemony Council was the closest thing the galaxy had to a central government. Rachel's face went pale as she read the message. "They're sending a fleet to Earth," she said. 200 ships. They say the Kashari raid shows that Earth is a danger to the stability of the galaxy. They're going to look into it, which is a diplomatic way of saying invade. Jake, they're going to take your world and we can't do anything to stop them. Jake looked at the sword in his hand, the people who had been freed and were now sleeping in the ship's cargo bay, and Rachel, who had been fighting a losing battle for thousands of years. He thought about his mother, his friends, and everyone else on Earth who had no idea what was going to happen. "Yes, there is," Jake said in a low voice. The sword glowed blue as if it agreed. "We can always do something. We just have to be ready to fight for it." Rachel looked at him for a long time before smiling that sad smile of hers. "You're really going to go through with this, aren't you? To save your world, fight the whole hegemony." Jake said, "They're coming no matter what I do. At least this way, Earth doesn't have to deal with them alone." The sword hummed in agreement, and in the quantum processors of its ancient AI, plans began to form for a battle that would decide the fate of all people. Jake had 2 weeks to get ready before the hegemony fleet got to Earth. 2 weeks to get ready for an army that could turn whole continents into glass. Rachel spent the first 3 days sending messages to everyone she knew and every back channel she could find. She called in favors that were hundreds of years old and reached out to anyone who might remember what the Valerian ascendancy stood for. At first, the answers came in slowly, but then they came in faster. A few ships from species that the Valorians had once protected. Fleets of refugees with no other place to go. People who were pirates or outcasts and had their own reasons to hate the hegemony. Some human governments finally accepted the truth about what was out there and sent what little they could spare. It wasn't a military. It was hardly a military. But it was something. Jake worked harder than ever on those days, pushing the sword to show him more of what it could do. He learned how to shoot energy blasts that could stop ships. He found out that he could connect with old Valorian technology that was spread out across the galaxy and had been dormant for thousands of years. The sword was teaching him and getting him ready, but he wasn't sure for what. On the 10th day, when the hegemony fleet was only a few days away from Earth, Rachel came to him with an idea that sounded crazy. "There's an old law," she said, pulling up old legal codes on her screen. "The right of champions. It goes back to a time before my people fell, when the galaxy had rules that meant something. You can challenge the hegemony to a duel if you can call it up correctly. Their best fighter against you. The winner gets everything." Jake looked at her. "Do you want me to fight one person to decide what happens to Earth?" "One being," Rachel said to correct. "And yes, I know it sounds crazy. But it's okay with the law. Binding. The hegemony has to leave and accept Earth's sovereignty if you win. If you lose, Earth becomes a hegemony protectorate, which is just a fancy word for colony. But at least your people will live." "What if I don't challenge them?" Rachel's silence said it all. The fleet would arrive. Earth would fight. The Earth would lose. A lot of people would die. "Get it ready," Jake said. The challenge was sent out through official channels and broadcast to all the major civilizations. The hegemony didn't pay attention to it at first. Then their lawyers looked at the old laws and saw that the challenge was real and that saying no would make them look weak. They agreed 3 days before their fleet got to Earth. The arena was a platform in space that was built just for the challenge. There was a circle that was about 100 feet wide, with a clear floor that let you see the stars below. Energy barriers marked the edges. Billions of beings in the galaxy watched. Some people thought it was fun. Some people thought it was making history. A teen with an old weapon facing off against the champion of the most powerful political group in known space. Jake stepped onto the platform with a sword in his right hand that was glowing blue. He was wearing simple combat gear that Rachel had given him. His heart was pounding against his ribs, but his hands were steady. His opponent stood across the arena. Cross was the hegemony's champion, and he looked like a violent person. It was 9 feet tall, had black armor that looked like it absorbed light, and had cybernetic enhancements that could be seen at every joint. Its eyes were red and glowed as they followed Jake's every move. Rachel had told him that Cross had been fighting for 300 years, won more than 1,000 duels and never lost. He had a huge sword that crackled with energy and was meant to cut through the hulls of starships. Cross's voice echoed throughout the arena when he said, "You are brave, human. But being brave isn't enough. For hundreds of years I have trained. I have beaten warriors from 100 different worlds. You are a kid with a weapon you don't really know how to use. This won't last long." The signal went off. The fight started. Cross moved faster than anything that big should be able to. His first blow was so fast that it would have taken Jake's head off if the sword hadn't screamed a warning right into his brain. Jake barely avoided the huge blade, which passed inches from his face and moved the air around it. The second hit. Jake was able to raise his shield, but the blow sent him flying back across the platform. He hit the energy barrier so hard that he saw stars and then slid down to the floor, where his ribs hurt so much. He could tell something was broken, but he didn't have time to think about it because Cross was coming at him again. Jake rolled, hit back, and saw his sword bounce off armor that was made to protect against weapons mounted on ships. Cross's laugh sounded like thunder, and his next punch hit Jake in the chest. More ribs broke. Jake had a taste of blood. The fight turned into a nightmare. Jake used all the skills Rachel had taught him and all the tricks the sword had downloaded into his brain, but none of them worked. Cross was too quick, too strong, and too skilled. He had been doing this for a long time, even before Jake's grandparents were born. He knew every counter, saw every move coming, and hit like a freight train. Jake was lying on his back, bleeding from a dozen cuts, and his vision was getting blurry. Cross stood over him and didn't even breathe hard. The champion said, "You fought well," and he really sounded like he meant it. "Better than I thought it would be. But this is done. The hegemony will take over your world. At least you gave them a chance, so don't worry. That is more than most species get." Jake made an effort to get up. His legs didn't work. He still had the sword in his hand and it was still glowing, but what good was it? He was foolish to believe he could do this. He was just a kid from Arizona who had come across something he didn't get. What made him think he could help anyone? But then he remembered the people who lived on that Kashari station. He thought about how Beth was crying and thanking him for bringing her home. He thought about his mom, his friends, and everyone else on Earth going about their normal lives, not knowing that whether or not he could get up would determine their future. He thought about what Rachel had said, that the sword chose him not because he was strong but because of what was in his heart. And Jake learned something that changed everything. He had been fighting the whole time like he had something to prove. He fought like he had to show the galaxy that humans were strong, that he was worthy of the sword, and that he belonged there. He had been fighting to prove his worth and gain something he already had. But that's not why the sword picked him. That wasn't what it meant to be a warden. Jake gave up trying to prove himself. He stopped fighting like a warrior who wanted to win fame. He fought like what he really was, a scared teen who would do anything and go through anything to keep his home and everyone in it safe. The sword lit up like a firework. It was no longer blue, it was white, bright, and pure. Energy flowed through Jake, not just into him but also out of him. His determination, desperation, and refusal to let Earth fall gave the weapon power it hadn't had in 10,000 years. Jake got up. It didn't matter that his ribs were broken anymore. The sword showed him how to move, but this time he knew what the moves meant. This time he wasn't just doing what he was told. He was fighting for a reason. Cross came at him again, but all of a sudden the champion was too slow. Jake's sword found the weak spots in the old armor and hit them with deadly accuracy because he knew exactly what he wanted to do. He wasn't trying to beat a better opponent anymore. He was defending his world, and the sword did everything it could to help him. The battle changed. For the first time in 300 years, Cross had to defend himself. His experience didn't matter when he was up against someone who was fighting with such desperate determination that they didn't care about the odds or logic. Jake hit Cross over and over again, each blow sending more energy into his weapon. Finally, his blade cut through Cross's weapon and sent the big warrior to his knees. Jake stood over him, breathing heavily, with the sword pointed at Cross's throat. There was no noise at all in the arena. Billions of beings in the galaxy saw a human teenager who should have died beat a champion who had never lost. "Yield," Jake said softly. Cross looked at him for a long time before nodding. "I give up." "You win, Warden. Your world is free." The arena went crazy. Not in cheers, but in disbelief and respect that they didn't want to show. Jake had done what no one else could do. He had used the oldest laws in the galaxy to win Earth's freedom, and now every civilization had to accept it. Rachel met him as he was falling off the platform and caught him before he fell. "You did it," she said in a low voice. "I can't believe you really did it." Jake asked, "Is the Earth safe?" Rachel said, "For now. The hegemony must respect the challenge. They will pull out. But Jake, you need to know what you just did. You didn't just save your own world. You reminded the universe that the old ways are still around. That safety is more important than power. That one person can change everything by fighting for what they believe in." 3 days later they sent Jake back to Earth. Now everyone in the world knew everything. The governments finally came clean about aliens and the danger they posed to humans. Jake arrived in front of the UN building with Rachel by his side. Cameras from all over the world were there to record his arrival. He was 17 years old. He had just beaten an intergalactic champion in a fight. Now he was standing in front of people from every human government, holding a sword that was 10,000 years old, and trying to explain what would happen next. "We have time now," Jake said. "Time to get ready. It's time to make the tools we need to protect ourselves. But the galaxy won't leave us alone for long. They are aware of our existence now. They know we're coming." He raised the sword and the cameras caught its light. "This weapon picked me to be a protector. But I can't keep 7 billion people safe by myself. We need to work together. We need to get ready. The problems will come back one day, maybe soon. And we all need to be ready for the next time." With the help of Rachel and the freed prisoners from the Kashari station, Jake set up a foundation. The goal was simple: get people ready for the galaxy. Teach defenders. Make new technology. Make friends with the few species that are willing to treat humans fairly. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Jake would sometimes go back to Arizona to see his mom and try to live a normal life. But the sword never left his side, and he knew that when he pulled it from that rock, he had given up on being normal. The galaxy was now looking at Earth. Some species are hopeful and wonder if the Valorian's legacy will live on. Others were afraid of what people might become if they had time to grow. And a few who were hungry and already thinking about the day when Earth's protection might fail. But for now there was a champion for all of humanity. A scared kid from Arizona who had been chosen by an ancient weapon and thought that was enough reason to protect his world from everything that wanted to destroy it. The sword hummed in agreement. After 10,000 years of waiting, a warden was back on duty. And this time he wasn't by himself.